He was richer than Jeff Bezos, wiser than any philosopher, and his story is written in the most read book of all time, the Bible. But how did King Solomon, the son of a shepherd-turned-king, become the wealthiest man in biblical history? Was it just gold and silver that made him rich? Or was it something deeper? Wisdom, favor, and a destiny shaped by divine hands. Solomon's life was a story of contrast, a rise marked by wisdom, fame, and blessing, followed by a fall that echoed for generations. Though not David's oldest son, he was chosen to continue the legacy, build the temple, and guide Israel at its peak. His reign drew rulers from distant lands, not just for trade, but to hear his wisdom. He settled disputes with clarity, wrote proverbs still remembered today, and gained wealth beyond imagination. But his story isn't only about greatness, it's about choices, and how even the wisest man can lose his way. Unexpected rise to power. Solomon's journey to the throne wasn't smooth or expected. In fact, it was filled with tension, rivalry, and last-minute decisions that could have changed the course of biblical history. He was the son of David and Bathsheba, a relationship that had begun in scandal but was later restored by grace. Solomon wasn't David's firstborn. He had older brothers, especially Adonijah, who believed he had the rightful claim to the throne. As King David grew old and weak, Adonijah took matters into his own hands. Without David's permission, he declared himself king, gathered followers, hosted a royal feast, and began to celebrate his so-called coronation. But not everyone stayed silent. Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, moved quickly. With the help of the prophet Nathan, she approached the aging king and reminded him of a sacred promise, that Solomon, not Adonijah, was to be his rightful successor. David, though frail, responded with strength and clarity. He ordered Solomon to be anointed immediately. The young man was placed on the king's own mule, escorted by royal guards, and paraded through the city. Trumpets sounded, the people rejoiced, and Adonijah's celebration came to a sudden, fearful halt. In one powerful moment, the nation's future was redirected forever. But Solomon's rise wasn't just about a throne. It was about destiny. God had chosen him, even from the womb, to lead Israel in peace and to build the sacred temple, a task David was not permitted to complete. That moment wasn't just political. It was spiritual. It confirmed that God's plans always prevail, even when human ambition interferes. Solomon's kingship began in uncertainty, but it turned into a divinely guided transition that set the stage for one of the greatest reigns in all biblical history. From conflict came clarity, and a king anointed by heaven, wisdom and favor of God. Solomon's reign truly began the night he experienced an encounter that changed his life forever. After being firmly established as king, he traveled to Gibeon, where the tabernacle stood. There he offered sacrifices to God, not out of routine, but from a sincere heart seeking direction. That night, God appeared to him in a dream and asked a question no one had ever heard before. "Ask for anything, and I will give it to you." Most people would have asked for power, long life, or victory over enemies. But Solomon asked for something far greater: wisdom. He wanted a heart that could understand people, make fair judgments, and lead God's nation with clarity. His request pleased God deeply. Because he didn't ask for riches or fame, God gave him wisdom beyond any man who had lived before and any who would come after. But God didn't stop there. He also gave Solomon wealth, honor, and influence beyond imagination. Soon, Solomon's wisdom became the foundation of his global reputation. People traveled from distant lands just to hear him speak. He wrote thousands of proverbs and shared insights about leadership, relationships, nature, and the human heart. His most famous act of wisdom came when two women fought over a baby. With one shocking but brilliant decision, Solomon revealed the true mother and amazed the entire nation. God's favor rested heavily on him. Israel entered a rare era of peace and prosperity. Neighboring kings sought alliances with him, not out of fear, but deep respect. His kingdom expanded, his voice carried weight across nations, and everyone recognized that a divine hand guided his leadership. But wisdom is also responsibility, and as Solomon's influence grew, the pressures around him grew as well. Peak of wealth and glory. Solomon's reign reached a level of wealth and beauty the ancient world had never seen. What began with wisdom soon expanded into a kingdom overflowing with gold, peace, and global influence. The centerpiece of his achievements was the construction of the Temple of God in Jerusalem. For generations, David had dreamed of building it, but it was Solomon who turned that dream into reality. The temple took 7 years to complete, built with the highest craftsmanship and the finest materials. Cedar from Lebanon, massive stones cut perfectly to fit, and gold that covered nearly every surface. It wasn't just a building, it was a symbol of God's presence among his people. When it was finally dedicated, a cloud filled the inner rooms, and the glory of God rested inside, confirming Solomon's devotion and obedience. But the temple was only one part of his greatness. Solomon expanded Jerusalem, built stunning palaces, and developed fortified cities that strengthened the nation. Trade routes flourished under his leadership. Israel became the center of commerce as merchants traveled through the land, bringing wealth from Arabia, Africa, and distant islands. Ships built under Solomon's command sailed to faraway places and returned with gold, silver, ivory, precious stones, and exotic animals. His annual income in gold alone was so overwhelming that silver became almost worthless in Israel. The Bible describes silver as being as common as stones during his reign. No other king in Scripture is portrayed with such extraordinary prosperity and influence. This fame drew the attention of rulers across the world. The most famous visit came from the Queen of Sheba, who traveled a great distance to test Solomon with difficult questions. But when she saw his wisdom, his palace, his officials, and the offerings he made to God, she was left completely breathless. She declared that not even half of Solomon's greatness had been told to her. Decline and final years. For many years, Solomon's kingdom shined with peace, beauty, and blessing. But even the wisest man can fall when his heart begins to drift. As Solomon grew older, the small compromises he once ignored slowly turned into major cracks in his foundation. To strengthen political alliances, Solomon married women from many nations: Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and Egypt. These marriages were common for kings in ancient times, but they carried a spiritual danger. These wives brought their gods, their idols, and their practices into Jerusalem. Instead of leading them toward the God of Israel, Solomon allowed their influence to reshape his heart. Over time, he began to tolerate what he once rejected. Scripture says that Solomon loved many foreign women, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God. He built altars for their gods on the hills around Jerusalem, places where sacrifices and rituals were offered to idols. The man who had once built the temple for the God of heaven now built shrines for false gods. It was a slow and painful decline, one decision at a time. God had warned Israel's kings not to multiply wives, horses, or gold, because these things could turn a leader's heart away. Solomon did all three, and eventually, the consequences caught up with him. God told Solomon that the kingdom would be torn apart after his death. Although Solomon would remain king until the end of his life, the peace he once enjoyed was broken as enemies began to rise against him. When Solomon died, the kingdom he had built with such glory was divided in two: Israel in the north and Judah in the south. His son Rehoboam inherited the throne, but not the wisdom. A single moment of pride split the nation permanently. Solomon's life ended as a reminder that even the greatest gifts can be lost when the heart turns away from its source. Wisdom cannot preserve a person who refuses to follow it. Solomon's life inspires and warns us. Wisdom means nothing without a faithful heart. His rise was great, but his fall reminds us to stay grounded in God. If this story moved you, like the video and subscribe for more powerful Bible history.